The 5 words your team uses to describe your business when you're not in the room. Let's jump in. Welcome to Business Growth Blueprint, the podcast for faith-driven business owners who want to grow in profitability, leadership, and culture. I'm your host, BJ O'Neill, the Coach's Coach, a founding partner with John Maxwell Certified Leadership, best-selling author and business owner, and I help equip business owners just like you with the tools to build something great, because every breakthrough starts with a blueprint. So there's a version of your business that unfortunately you actually never see. If you own the business, if you are the leader, the CEO, the director, the pastor, whatever, there is a version of what's going on when you're not around. And this is the challenge. Oftentimes we think one thing, but then one thing's happening over here. And we're going to walk through. And look, this is one of those wrestling matches that if you really want to build team unity and culture, you got to wrestle with the conversation that we're having today. But it's what the team describes when about the business when you're not available, when you're not around, when you're not in the room. And that version, in most cases, I'm going to explain the word most, in most cases, that is the actual truth. Now, asterisks, where it's not the truth, if you're going through a challenge right now and you've got a couple of bad apples, and I know people are amazing, I know God loves all, but sometimes, there are challenging personalities, there are just challenging dynamics, but there are a lot of negative people who can cause problems, who can poison the well, who are kind of cancerous to the overall whole. If you're dealing with a lot of that, I'm not exactly referring to that. That's kind of a separate conversation and topic to some degree. Now, if you're not dealing with it and you know it's happening, that's not good. We got to deal with that as well. But the majority, we'll call it, you got a team, whether it's 2 people or whether it's 200. There is a version of that culture that's happening when you're not around. And the question is, do you know what it is? Because what they are saying, what they are describing, what they're talking to one another about, that's actually the version of the real culture. So here's what can happen. And I've seen this happen countless times. When you walk into the room, in other words, when you're around the team, the conversation shifts. Why do they shift? They're shifting because for some reason, there's not enough either trust built, there's not enough value built for there to be transparency. And so they shift it around for you so that you'll hear what they believe that you want to hear. All right. So this is the tough stuff, right? This is the really, really tough stuff that we have to deal with. Look, culture is not the mission statement and the values that are painted on the wall or that are a part of the onboarding process that you're going to deliver with new team members. It's the unscripted language. All right, write that down. It's the unscripted language that your team uses, again, when there's no reason to perform or, they have apathy, whatever. These are the things that are happening that, look, there's 2 things that happen. Either you create culture or culture creates itself. If you're absent in creating the culture, culture will be created by a dominant individual or negative individuals that get around the water cooler. All right? It's going to happen one way or the other. And if you ignore it, which is not good, you're going to likely have some challenges. When we look at this as a faith-driven entrepreneur, business owner, leader, and we say, through the lens of faith, how should I begin to process this? Think about this, pray about this. And a verse that comes to mind is Luke 6:45, and it just talks about, and you probably are familiar with this verse likely, out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. What that just simply means is that if someone's walking into their place of work, their place of, where they're getting paid, their wage, their contract, whatever they're dealing with, good, bad, or indifferent, is what they are going to say. Now, look, I get it. We should not gossip. That is a scriptural, a biblical thing to do. But the reality is, humans are humans. We live in a fallen world. People are messy. My pastor talks about that all the time, that people are messy. And we don't have to go far, that being the disciples alone. I mean, just look at the whole journey that Jesus took with the disciples and how messy that whole process was. One of them, denied him, to his face as if he didn't know. Why? People are messy. People are messy. And so there's a culture that you can't see. And we're going to talk about 5 different words. And I'm going to share with you a healthy version of what that should look like and what an unhealthy version looks like as well. But you've got to make a distinction between a stated culture. This is important. You have to make a distinction between stated culture and the lived culture. In other words, the actual, active, real, happening culture. And the question is, do you know? I'm going to share with you some actionable steps that you can take today to begin to find out. And if you're sitting there and this is uncomfortable, this is the part of leadership, ownership, partnership that is real. And here is an unfortunate truth. A lot of leaders ignore it. Now, for you, when you look in the mirror, what does that mean? Are you, taking the bull by the horn, if you will? In other words, are you actively driving culture? Now, I want you to think just for a moment. We'll use by far the majority of businesses in America, I would argue even globally, are typically in the services industry. Carpet cleaning, roofing, dry cleaning, pressure washing, lawn care, all of that, right? And those are industries typically that do oftentimes struggle because oftentimes the owner is also out in the field, plumbing, HVAC, pool cleaning, you name it, excavating, all those types, right? And they get wrapped up into the operations of the business. Now, I might be speaking to you. Statistically, I probably am talking to a number of you. And oftentimes that we're in the operational parts of the business. You're in the bulldozer, you're digging the thing, you're turning the wrench, which is fine. But it also makes you absent to a lot of other pieces of the puzzle of the business. So the question is, how are you leading the culture? Or are you abandoning it and it's creating itself? That's something that you have to drive. Maybe you're a nonprofit organization. Maybe you rely exclusively on donations of some sort, and you got a team of 10. You do galas, you do auctions, all these things, right? But because of your role, even though that you're the leader, you're the director, maybe you're the executive director, and you're out meeting with donors all the time. And you've got 3 or 4 team members back at the office. You've got a couple of folks that are out doing what you do at different levels, at different intervals. Maybe you cover regions or the whole, a whole area, a state, the nation. But when you're absent because of the operational role that you have, what's happening? What's being said? What is the language? What is the actual lived out activity happening related to culture? That's the stuff that we have to find out. So your job as the owner, the leader, the CEO, the director, you've got to determine and give an honest assessment to find out what's actually happening. You can't run the risk of just believing that when you walk out the door, everything is identical than when you're inside the room. Here's 5 words. We're going to walk through this to reveal the descriptors rather of healthy versus unhealthy. Number 1, safe. All right. So these are, let's remind ourselves, 5 words that your teams use to describe your business when you're not in the room. You got to determine which ones are being used. Safe. I can be transparent. I can be myself. I'm not worried that someone's going to take advantage of me. I'm not worried about my leader, taking advantage of me. I'm not working. I don't have to edit my words per se. I can be vulnerable. I can be vocal. Versus guarded. When the business owner, the director, when the leader's in the room, I guard my words. I don't feel comfortable being open and transparent, not honest, but candid, even a better term. I'm scared that when I have candor, that I'm going to get a whiplash from somebody. If I speak about the truths about a team member that are affecting me negatively, I'm going to get, dismissed, or not dismissed as in the job, but I'm going to have a dismissive conversation. Number 2, clear versus confused. Clear means I understand the job. I understand my role. There's clarity on priorities. I'm clear that if I don't understand those things, I can speak freely and be clear. Can you repeat that? I'm sorry, did you mean this or did you mean that? Without there being, a backhanded comment or something negative, or, feeling like I'm just being put down. Or there is confused, right? Where I don't want to say anything, but I don't really understand exactly what they meant. I thought we were working on this month, not that, but now they're talking about, that, and I'm over here doing this, and vice versa. There's a lot of confusion. The team member, the leader walks out the room and the team leader says, we got to do this, but that's not what he just said or she just said. I know that, but we're going to do it this way. But wait a minute, hold on. So it brings chaos. It brings confusion. Trusted versus micromanaged. Look, one of the definitions of leadership versus management is that management says you do it because I said to do it. But leadership is you do it because you feel inspired to do it. In other words, you know that your contribution in your way, I don't care if you're sweeping the floor. You've heard that term where guys at NASA, and he walks up to a gentleman and says, so what are you here doing? And the guy says, I'm helping to put a man on the moon. Well, he was a janitor. You probably have heard that story, right? But when you're trusted, I've got the keys to my world. Here's my job description. Here are the things I'm responsible for. And the leader is entrusting me. When they leave, they're in the field, they're on vacation, they're at a conference. I'm doing the same exact thing, no matter if they're in the room or they're out of the room, because they trust me to get my job done. We have an agreement together. They understand what I'm working on. Versus micromanaged. Did you get it done? Are you doing it? Where are we at? What's going on? Are you sure? Like constantly being questioned, constantly, the leader is just can't seem to let go and just let someone walk through. And side note, real fast, if you are the business owner, the leader, the CEO, the pastor, well, here's the reality, the real truth. There are plenty of people smarter than you and smarter than me, period. Okay? Just because you have the idea doesn't mean you can understand how to execute it as good as somebody else. So you got to trust people. But what's happening? You walk out and they feel like, golly, man, they just will not stop. They just are constant. They just will not let me get my job done. They're 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times a day. Did you get it done? Did you get it done? What about this? What about that? Micromanaged. Next, valued versus used, right? You walk out of the room and someone goes, man, I love being here and doing my part to help move the needle for whatever it is that you do. I feel appreciated. When I walk in the door, when I'm getting up and I'm getting the family out the door, it's February, it's freezing cold outside, it's still dark, and I get in the car and I head into work, I feel passion, I feel purpose, I feel value. Or used. You walk out the door and they're like, golly, I'm just a number. I'm not anybody special. I don't feel like I've ever been appreciated. I don't even know that I've even recognized. I've worked all this extra work, done everything extra that I've been asked to do, and it's just one more thing. Tomorrow, little one more thing. But when the leader walks in the room, you don't hear any of that. And last, steady. In other words, we have projects, we have systems, we have pathways. We understand, everybody understands what's happening. And there's just great understanding and a steadiness of how the business is moving forward. Or you walk out, chaos. It appeared that things were like that. When you walked out, there's fighting, there's gossiping, there's attacking, there's negativity. It's just chaotic. Disagreements on how we should do projects. But you walk in the room, you don't see any of it. So what do you do? And you hear those things, you're like, I want to believe that I heard all the good stuff, but what if? And so as I want to encourage you as the leader, whether you're the owner, the leader, doesn't matter. I want to encourage you to have the courage to ask yourself the question and to do something about it to verify. So here is your takeaway, your actionable step and takeaway. All right. Write down the 5 words. You ready? This is going to be hard. Write down the 5 words that you hope your team uses. And then the 5 words that you fear that they actually use. That's tough. I know. I get it. Because you're like, man, I really hope that they're using these, but I'm scared that they might be using these. And that's what we have to kind of work through. And then we got to find a trusted source. Maybe you have a second in command kind of individual or a trusted, valued employee, team member, confidant, consultant, whatever. You can't just go to anybody. You got to make sure that there's enough trust in the tank to verify. Hey, here's what I hope is happening. But I'm fearing that this is happening, and I want to know. Now, you also could do it this way. If you feel like 2 different ways you can look at this. Let's say you have a crew of 8, right? And there's enough trust and enough value, but do you know that there are some hiccups here and there? You can go in there as the canary, if you will, on your own and just say, guys, girls, ladies, folks, amazing people. I've been studying, reading, and praying and thinking, processing, call it how you want. I want you to feel like, I'm somewhere that matters. But I'm not sure that that's actually what happens when I walk out of the room. And you just tell them, here are the 5 things I hope that you're feeling, saying, thinking when I'm not around. But I wonder sometimes if this is what's happening. And you have a candid conversation, you give open space. Now, look, I get that. Everybody's personality is different. You might not feel comfortable doing it that way. And there's dynamics there that I don't know about clearly, but you got to decide. Doing nothing, I will tell you, is not the answer. Taking action and not assuming, I'll let you determine what the word assume means, right? If you assume, you're probably going to be on the other side of the assumption, because every time I find somebody, well, I just assumed it that way. Did you? Last time I checked, most of the time when we're assuming, we already know the truth. So you must decide. All right. And so I want to, again, leave you with Luke 6:45. It is really about the heart. You can really study that verse on your own. But you must set the language of the team. Party of 1, party of 100, doesn't matter. You got to do it. You cannot leave it in the hands of somebody else. Otherwise, you run risk of it going a different direction. And you wake up one day, and I'll tell you, I've seen it happen over and over again. It's not a simple thing to fix when it gets really, really colluded with the wrong people, the wrong attitudes, the wrong behaviors, the wrong intentions. It really can. I'm not trying to be a prophet of doom, negative Nelly, none of those things. I'm just being real. And I want to help you walk through it as your strategist, as your coach. You can do something about it, but you can't if you don't get off the couch and actually do something about it, okay? Until next time. Hey, join me next time where we're going to discuss the 6 signs your cash flow is in trouble, even if you're profitable. See you then.